because it's not normal for people to do that.
I'm not normal. I play Falco. I'm a beast. I'm a different type of beast.
Welcome to my undergraduate junior year thesis where I analyze an unhinged manifesto written by a high school student. I recognize the heavy connotations of the word manifesto, but none of those connotations apply to this manifesto. You see, this manifesto will manage to present itself as a dramatic and grandiose recap of a social experiment, as well as a masterful dissection on the culture of a Pokemon website, but in reality, this manifesto has no wisdom on interpersonal relationships, communication, or even the Pokemon website that it's about. And that's the most impressive part. The 4.5-year-old document dives heavily into a culture of toxicity and hate, but achieves nothing and becomes a mildly coherent blend of a call-out post, unhinged rant, video essay script, and an ethnography of internet culture. So here's a preview of how I'll teach you about the beauty of this document, the Feline's Manifesto. First, I'll introduce the necessary context for the manifesto. Hopefully you'll see how necessary this is, as the document was written for people who are already familiar with the niche internet culture. Next, I, alongside my cast of narrators, will gradually read through the 2,102 word count Feline's Manifesto, while providing context and brief analysis for each chunk of the text. I'll focus on limiting this to the specifics of context which will be necessary because of the author's esoteric writing style.
Get off that track! Not a doing. You're gonna stop because that's what you do when you're faced with a quirk.
The context. You could think of this as a Q&A on the basics of the manifesto, but if you would like to jump right into the deep end, then feel free to skip to this segment. So who is Felines? Felines is a Pokemon gamer and a sophomore high school student working on a junior year thesis. I get that it makes it sound like I'm picking on a high schooler, but I'm not. On the contrary, I think it's impressive that the greatest manifesto ever written was made by a 15-year-old with a tenuous grasp of what a thesis is. I'm using an alias for Felines as they are still active in the community, which his manifesto is about. I know it's a weird name, but it's relatively similar to the one he used. So what is Feline's topic? Broadly speaking, Feline's topic is the culture of competitive Pokemon on a website called Pokemon Showdown. If you aren't into video games, don't worry, because I won't be getting into the boring details. This video is for a general audience, not the Pokemon Showdown community, who I won't be sharing this video with. What is Pokemon Showdown? Pokemon Showdown is a website which stimulates Pokemon battles and allows players to build their own Pokemon teams from scratch. It's very open-ended and community-driven due to the grassroots nature of the website. Felines will focus on one specific community called the Monotype community. Monotype is a specific way of playing Pokemon Showdown, and to this day has a dedicated player base. When was the manifesto written? The text was written on December 1st of 2019. The document covers Felines' experiences and his alleged social experiment which took place throughout 2019 from January until December. It's helpful to note that both the culture of the community and the character of each individual in the manifesto has changed since this document was written. The document was not explicitly named the Feline's Manifesto, but this is a nickname used for the youthful treatise. Additional note, each time the manuscript says, insert name here, today at X time, is a message from said individual, not Felines. With that said, let's begin. I'll be randomly switching around my cast of voice actors throughout the reading. Content warning, ableist language, and a large amount of negativity coming from the manifesto.
I ain't fucking scared of him.
At Lucky Piper. Quite possibly the largest clown I've ever met on the entire internet. I swear I haven't seen this user post a single intelligent line other than the times he defended me in auth chat LMAO. I honestly think he might be unable to post an informed response on any subject, because it is literally always question mark, period, question mark, shut up, shut the fuck up, r-word/clown, LOL, LMAO. There might be more, but those are the three main ones. Interesting then, how he calls me a headass or a clown whenever I don't agree with his opinion, which, ironically, is exactly something that a headass or clown does, but I digress. Post-edit. My point was proven. Felines today, at 11 p.m. 591 words for Lucky Piper. On to the next one. Doug Zaw today at 11 p.m. You were being serious when you said you riding in a paste bin? Yikes. Lucky Piper today at 11:01 p.m. LMFAO, oh my god.
If this sounds confusing, that's because it is. Most manifestos don't start off reading like a hit piece versus one of your internet ops, but the Felines Manifesto does. Anyways, the key takeaway here is that Felines heavily dislikes Lucky Piper, rightfully so seemingly, and also that Felines is willing to share the fact that other people find his Pastebin manifesto embarrassing. For context, Pastebin is a free-to-use website which can share large amounts of text. A link to the Pastebin is also how I got access to the Felines Manifesto, despite not being around the mod-type community in 2019 when this was written and published. Continued.
The true issue with this user is his ego. You see, after Lucky Piper was miraculously drafted in the prestigious MPLV, probably due to his playing of a game known as AMQ, his ego skyrocketed, unfortunately turning a very tolerable user into an egotistical maniac. For weeks on end, I was forced to endure Lucky Piper talk about how he was robbed of his victory versus WinCon. If only I had hit play rough. He was the peachy slayer, and that was the only thing preventing said users from going 10-0 when he quite possibly had a top 3 most easy matchup in monotype, Electric First Balance Water. Like LOL, how the BW team he built was GOAT oh my lord, how he only lost his BW game due to an unwinnable matchup, it was Grass versus no Victini Psychic for what it's worth, how is this shit unwinnable? Plus, if the team you built was GOAT oh my lord, how does it have an unwinnable matchup versus the best type in the tier without using its best Pokemon? How he carried his team due to this GOAT building skills, and even more that I can't think of at this current moment. Jesus Christ. Yes, MPL unfortunately corrupted said user. Truly a shame. I have even heard that he argued with his longtime friend, IMBU. I honestly don't even remember this argument. He once even publicly posted this. Felines may have had a better name change, but he definitely didn't have a better MPL win rate. Guaranteed this was referring to me versus Abby, but still. Side note, I beat Abby as a result of this comment. However, had Lucky Piper played, he probably would have considered my matchup unwinnable. The dramatic effects of this are still felt today. While Piper will claim that he never brings up MPL, the truth is he does so constantly. Sometimes even without realizing it, and I'm sure he'll consider this comment clownery or headass, but hey, what can you do? Unfortunately for all of you, being corrupted by MPL is not a valid excuse for absolute clownery Lucky Piper participates in. I'll let him speak for himself here in a recent debate about ULC. Lucky Piper today at 11:01 p.m. Oh my fucking god. You R-worded child. It's nobody's problem. It's not a problem. So shut the fuck up and let us talk. Your lack of working brain cells is gonna make me blow my head off.
Yeah, if you're saying this to anyone, much less in the context of the quote, there's definitely something that needs to be fixed. Alas, recently I've come to the conclusion that Lucky Piper was less corrupted by MPL, and more so, awakened by it. There is something deeply mean-spirited about his entire existence. Perhaps that's why he fits in with the community so well, Lamau. I'm not going to get too much into Felines jargon, especially because I can only understand 80% of it, but all you need to know is that it can mostly be summarized as him humble bragging while calling his op bad at the game in a callout section. As for MPL, Felines is referring to something called the Monotype Premier League. It's a Premier League style tournament in which Pokemon players are drafted towards teams. Now, Felines will talk about another user who he dislikes and considers toxic. Continued.
Aïe aïe aïe, tu dérailles, espèce de canaille. Si tu libères Didi, y'aura pas de représailles.
L'anneau de coco en cristal contre le chimpanzé. Je compte jusqu'à 10, c'est à toi de décider.
And then Dugza. Speaking of ego problems, here's the very definition of one. I think the others have said it best before me, but let me explain in detail for those who do not know. Although I could consider this another case of corrupted by MPL, I consider the problem to be much deeper. The problem first arose in BLT, when Dugza, who had somehow managed to go 1-4, decided that somehow he was the shit anyway, and that instead a much worthier cause to pursue would be to ridicule my one loss, and also fish for activity wins, because that was what he had to resort to in order to get a win. I should mention, he did indeed win this game, but only because he used my team, which I regret having passed in hindsight, and I'm sure he regrets using as well. And after this, like a balloon inflating with oxygen, thus Dugza's ego began to swell to such disproportionate levels that became clear even to users who seemed not to pay as much attention to him, such as Catalytic, that there was a discrepancy. It began with the famous MPL corruption that so plagued fellow Rhyperior Lucky Piper. However, instead of the obnoxious brag about every aspect of your MPL experience approach that Lucky Piper took, Dugza took a completely opposite route. Whine about his team. Yes, it appears that Dugza could not stand the Cherubies and his wote managers, Starblim and Vid, which I guess is understandable, seeing as they did completely terrible despite having the best monotype player, Wincon. Case in point.
Can I be released? Got drafted on the team I didn't want. Lame.
Macho Finesser, June 23rd. Apologies, lol. Dugza. Teammates are meh. One manager is such a big F. Imagine being on a BLT team like this with great team spirit and ending up on that team for MPL.
The team I didn't want? Lame. Can you believe a clown like this? Takes a small drop on the cloud and suddenly is thirsty for the whole bottle. Unsurprisingly, his team lost majorly, although Dugza did inherit a Lucky Piper-like habit of mentioning Starblim causing his qualification in Week 6, which I admittedly have never quite gotten, although I believe it has something to do with Banks? Art? Probably. Too lazy to look it up.
This all would have been fine probably if the icing on top of the cake had not been spread. Miraculously, Dugza was drafted for LTPL instead of WinCon. Lol, imagine picking some monotype random instead of literally a top 3 monotype player. I still can't believe it, but I digress. He decided to employ his MPL strategy into this tournament too, as he is complaining about his team as I am writing this. Quote, "Ugh, I was looking forward to testing and playing with Ridley, but he is never active." Also, let me break down the first 2 weeks for you, okay? Ridley loses Fairy vs. Dark week 1, which is okay. Yeah, it's kinda bad, but it's not unreasonable in a match between 2 good monotype players. And also, this wasn't some whack Fairy team I don't recall. Probably had an Azuma role and that's why it lost. However, Dugza is subbed in and employs BLT-style activity fish shenanigans in LTPL. Oh my lord, you can't make this up! He then proceeds to play badly, including dragon dancing in front of a Whimsicott infamously. Yeah, I would even go so far as to say switching Ferrothorn into Mega Mawile is a better play than that. However, Dugza insists that he is being bullied by the monotype Imperium Room Snakes, and he played 100 times better than Ridley ever did. Huh, I wonder how it would ever feel for someone to talk badly about you. Oh well, another lost cause. Also, while I'm on the subject, I never started anything with Dugza. You can read the old logs if you don't believe me. That concludes his section on Dugza. Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with the logs he mentioned. He will proceed to call out one more person before quickly and fiercely turning this manifesto into a manifesto on his alleged social experiment instead of whatever it is so far. At I am Boo. Wow, this might be the most shocking one of all. To think that this person was once considered the quote, least toxic user of all of the Rhyperiors lol. Unlike the previous 2 users, I am Boo was notably absent in the draft for MPL, so you might be wondering, how did this user turn so toxic? But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, the reasons why he is toxic. 1. Inherited another Lucky Piper style trait of not being able to deal with anyone that doesn't have the same opinion as him, instead choosing to ask people, are you on drugs? Or, are you dumb? 2. Can't seem to find his own creative reason to hate me lol. Well, I suppose Lucky Piper kind of did this first. At least he, did it first. Jumping on his bandwagon without a good reason is not a good look. 3. Being a clown when it comes to ULC Lamau, since when was this person friends with Nam-Rinan? Watcho MC Boo Boo Man today at 9:14 AM. I'm staff at Felines. I can change it. Loser.
Yes, it seems that Boo is the worst type of toxic user, which is one that is only being toxic because everyone around him is being toxic, and he just wants to join in on the fun. Like seriously, can anyone think of any time I've wronged him? And suppose some goon, probably Lucky Piper, will argue, you don't need a reason to be toxic because you're so AIDS. And in response I ask this, Is being toxic for no reason the very reason of why you call me AIDS? So please, Boo, get some real reasons. Hopefully this write-up will at least give you one.
Those are the only people I can think of to write about. The rest of you are either cool or I don't talk to. However, at everyone, you all need to take a step back and reconsider how you talk to people. Seriously, just look at the kind of messages you all send me and really think about why you are sending these messages. Here's the time for me to reveal some truth.
Some of you may know that I re-entered Smogon after a brief hiatus. I came back with one goal in mind, to truly see how angry I could make everyone at me in a 12-month period. Well, I re-entered on approximately January 1st, and it is December 1st, so not quite there, but we'll see. Recently, I've been very interested in the study of psychology, and the concept of there being a beast inside some people. I've read Lord of the Flies twice now, and I wondered if I could create a similar style situation to the one presented in the book Get Online. Thus, when I noticed instantly how well the BLT team I was on was getting along, I saw my opportunity and seized on it. To begin my research, I set up a series of 10 tasks that I wanted to see if I could try to accomplish. Through just being present, I have accomplished 7 of them, which are the following.
1. Completely turn some members against me. Lucky Piper, Dugza, I am Boo. 2. Completely turn the outside public against me. 4. Cause at least one member to voluntarily leave. Twilight Solace. 5. Cause the internal public to turn on a fellow user. A random rift. 6. Cause the leader of the group to actively allows the internal public's turning on fellow users. 8. Gain the trust of one member. 10. Divide, then unite the group over collective hatred of me. For those interested, I did not accomplish, although I probably could have, but I'm done now. 3. Completely turn the leader of the group against me. 7. Cause the outside public to turn against the inside public. 9. Gain the distrust of all or all but one members. Through my research, I was astounded by how quickly the public turned on me despite having known me less than a year. The messages got very harsh very quickly, especially during the quote-unquote home stretch of my experimentation, the last 3 weeks. I did end up taking some of it personally, I must admit, but ultimately, I think I was able to stay away from getting offended by the attacks leveled at my feline's persona and remain level-headed. Another thing I must admit is that I'm not great at keeping secrets, which is why I chose to tell all of you this before my research is officially done. I'm still unfortunately engaged in community tours at the time of writing this, so I'm not sure how I will approach that, and I really do like some of you and wish you the best. I have extracted the logs and will be using this experimentation for my junior thesis next year. Thank you all.
Smoked a 7-gram backwood of Shadow Whisperer. Shit had me fucked up in the crib looking up pictures of dogs with human eyes.
Okay folks, I hope you enjoyed the full manifesto. I do recognize that it suddenly stops, which I find to be the most intriguing part about the text. I've never seen an author do something as bold as list a 10-step malicious Thanos-esque plan, say they accomplished it, say it's all going in their junior thesis, then end their writing. Now, I will explain why I believe this manifesto is completely unironic and not satire. I figured this would be an important section considering how much the manifesto reads like parody. I was initially considering making a list of key points where the manifesto looks like satire, but then I realized that each listener or reader probably has their own unique spot where they question the sincerity of the Feline's manifesto. Because of that, I'll give overall coverage into how a 15-year-old would genuinely write like this. 2 main reasons. 1. A high school sophomore wrote the manifesto. 2. No human could come up with a pastebin detailing their year-long Jesus complex while attaching it to an egotistical hit piece about people they dislike. So that's the basics as to why I will now analyze the Feline's manifesto as though it is fully sincere.
She broke my heart, had me shadowboxing behind the 7-Eleven in my 2005 Cleveland LeBron jersey, Zara jeans, and some LRG shoes. Windows tinted, listening to T Grizzly.
Stylistic analysis. The best instance of this, my favorite instance of this, is near the top of the document when Felines preemptively shows a reaction to him informing Dugza and Lucky Piper of him drafting the manifesto, except the reaction is embarrassing for Felines and gives an idea that the following manifesto will be unserious. It also undermines the actual toxicity that Dugza and Lucky Piper show later in the document because saying yikes to Felines' maladaptive behavior isn't exactly toxic. At least, it would give those ideas and impressions if the document was comprehensible on first read. Hopefully my intro was enough to make the beginning of the manifesto comprehensible. Speaking of incomprehensibility, Felines unintentionally employs a few strategies to make his writing difficult. When he shows logs of messages, he almost never prefaces it by showing a clear context for the interaction. You can see this when he immediately transitions into showing a manuscript of Lucky Piper saying the R slur. The only preface that Felines provides is that Lucky Piper got hostile and insulting during a bit about ULC, which is an acronym I don't understand and he never explains. Another expert technique that Felines uses is his dipping in and out of Pokemon jargon with mentions of people that we never hear of a second time and references to tournaments which no one would be familiar with if they 1. Exist in 2023 to 2024, or 2. Do not participate in the competitive monotype community. He doubles up on this Pokemon yapping persuasive tactic when he uses all caps to emphasize how emotional he is about his social experiment. Tonal analysis. Keep in mind that all of these tones switch between each individual thought if they are not already hybrid. For example, he goes from saying, "Alas, recently I've come to the conclusion," to "Perhaps that's why he fits in so well with the community Lamau." Given that this document is of legendary status, I'll treat this section as writing advice. All this advice comes from analysis of the manifesto, but it will be framed as lessons we can learn from Felines if we want to write like him. The different tones he uses and their efficacy. Use an awkward conversational tone. Felines creates a confusing and dazing vibe when he occasionally talks in a conversational tone. Quote, "And I'm sure he'll consider this comment clownery or head-ass, but hey, what can you do?" Another quote, "Decide that somehow he was the shit anyway." Or even, "Also, let me break down the first 2 weeks for you, okay?" When I explain the Felines manifesto to people, which has been a frequent event in my life given how hard I've been working on this YouTube video, I always struggle to define the Felines manifesto in a few words, so I usually offer multiple different words for the type of documents that it is at various times, like a blend. A declaration, a boast, an ethnography of Pokemon Showdown, a call-out post, a treatise for change, or broadly speaking, a manifesto. Notably, a conversational tone like the quotes I just read do not belong in any of these types of writing. But that doesn't concern Felines. No matter what form of writing he is going for, his writing style promotes inserting a random conversational tone. Have an esoteric, overly formal/pretentious tone. Quote, "Yes, MPL unfortunately corrupted said user. Truly a shame. I've even heard that he argued with his longtime friend I Am Boo. I honestly don't even remember this argument. He once even publicly posted this. Felines may have had the better name change, but he definitely didn't have the better MPL win rate." I'ma keep it a buck with my audience because I'm an honest video essayist who doesn't claim they know everything about writing. I have no idea why Felines thought it was a good idea to dip into this esoteric and pretentious tone. I can only offer a few potential explanations for why Felines may have taken this approach. Perhaps he used the formal tone to flex his vocabulary, like experimentation, corrupted, and ridicule, but those aren't exactly big words, they are only pretentious in how he uses them. Mayhaps he wrote statements like the one I read before, so he could establish authority via his tone of voice. In the 11th grade English classes that Felines was probably in, this strategy is called establishing ethos. It's puzzling why he gets up to what could only be called pretentious writing antics, considering that this manifesto is clearly not what he will use for his junior year thesis. From what I infer, he's only using the information from these situations for his junior year thesis, but the document itself is made to broadcast his writing, experience, and perspective on the community. This may be puzzling and more of a psychological issue than a writing one, but this tonal issue is also a valuable lesson for the Felines writing style. Do not consider who your audience is while you determine the tone of voice of your manifesto, school newspaper report, or whatever other written document you choose. You should write in the way that you find makes you look the best from a general point of view, regardless of both the topic and your audience. Be dramatic, as if your topic is an existential threat. To achieve dramatism and manufacture importance to his issues, Felines refers to his experiences like they are reflective of the entire monotype community, or an existential threat posed by the users that he dislikes. In one part, this is done by heightening the threat level of his ops by phrases such as corrupted by MPL, egotistical maniac, or deeply mean-spirited. In the other part, he uses vague and confusing references to culture-wide problems. At segments of his manifesto, he makes it explicit that there is a danger or toxicity within the monotype community. Each of these points are made in passing with no additional evidence. Quote, "There's something deeply mean-spirited about his entire existence, perhaps that's why he fits in with the community so well, Lamau." Felines spent more time deconstructing 3 allegedly toxic individuals instead of the monotype community culture, though. If we were to create a spectrum for personal and community-wide takedown/analysis, where iDubbbz's Content Cop series is at one side, and Frederick Knutson's Internet community documentaries at the other, Felines would be much closer to the iDubbbz side. Yet, while this is how he comes across, it may not be how he sees his own writing. This is apparent in one of his conclusory paragraphs where he calls out the broader community for being mean to him, as if he has been providing evidence for this the entire time instead of treating his manifesto like a call-out post to 3 people. Quote, "These are the only people I can think of to write about. The rest of you are either cool or I don't talk to, however..." And then he contradicts that with another quote, "At everyone, you all need to take a step back and reconsider how you talk to people. Seriously, just look at the kind of messages you all send me and really think about why you are sending these messages." His own message in the "At Everyone" section is already downplayed by the fact that he previously said the behavior of other users is so disregardable that he couldn't even think to write about it. But despite that, he lays down one sentence about how everyone needs to consider how they talk to people. But then he can't keep up that altruism for more than a sentence and goes back to talking about how people treat him. As a result, his grandiose address to the wider monotype community only highlights his own eccentricity through the overall anecdotal and highly personalized style of the manifesto. Even though the goals of his alleged project and research included a study of the idea that there is a, quote, beast inside some people, the end product of the manifesto is interpersonal but in a watching 2 people fight each other on public transit type of way. As Feline said himself, he took some of the results of his social experiment personally, and that's how most, if not all, of the manifesto comes across, like a personal rant. And the last, and favorite stylistic choice that I'll be analyzing, make metaphors that you, the writer, are clearly proud of. This one is likely a product of Felines being 15 at the time of writing his manifesto, but he seemingly went for the most creative metaphors he could draft and ended up with these 3. This all would have been fine probably if the icing on top of the cake had not been spread. And after this, like a balloon inflating with oxygen, thus Doug's ego began to swell. Can you believe a clown like this tastes a small droplet of clout and suddenly is thirsty for the whole water bottle? His metaphors are typically references to physical objects and other inanimate concepts instead of events, people, or situations. By this I mean that if you want to write like Felines, you should not say bro was ballin' like he's Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the presidential election of 1932, and instead should construct a metaphor such as, his insults are as stale as moldy bread, yet he serves them anyway. When using a Felines-esque metaphor, you need to make sure that you are talking about the most basic concepts possible. For instance, some people may think, can you believe a clown like this tastes a small droplet of clout and suddenly wants the whole damn faucet is a good idea? But it isn't. You gotta say the whole water bottle, even though a water bottle is not a large or indulgent amount of water. Your only focus will be keeping your message basic and corny. How the tones combine. Harmony and unscrupulous conflict. Keep in mind that having unscrupulous tone can be acceptable if you implement your tone, contradictions, and vibe shifts correctly. The unscrupulous conflict is primarily within the mix of Feline's grandiose and dramatic language, alongside when he dips into a conversational tone, often an aggressive and self-centered conversational tone. In many cases, Felines shifts the tone of his message midway through a sentence. Oftentimes, this is because of parenthetical statements when he busts into a conversational tone. Although he takes it to an extreme level by using these parenthetical statements for rant-esque messages, it still matches the common usage of parenthetical statements for providing a more personal note. Here's an example of this. How the black and white team he built was GOAT oh my lord, how he only lost his black and white game due to a quote-unquote unwinnable matchup. It was grass versus no Victini Psychic for what it's worth. How is this shit unwinnable? He takes a slightly casual tone into a conversational tone when he asks a rhetorical question, in all caps of course, because monotype matchups are serious and any false statement made about monotype matchups will be treated with a combative approach. But Felines, being the top-notch writer that he is, can also switch tone midway through a sentence without using parentheses at all. Quote, "This all would have been fine probably if the icing on top of the cake had not been spread. Miraculously, Dugza was drafted for LTPL instead of WinCon. Well, imagine picking some monotype random instead of literally a top 3 monotype player of the mount. I still can't believe it." Felines takes a similar approach to the previous example with his all-caps flow once again used to demonstrate the lack of intelligence which he sees in all of his ops. I love this example because it showcases both a feline-style metaphor and a feline-style unhinged rant. There are little to no examples of harmonious tone combination within the Felines Manifesto. In fact, I will soon introduce my psychological analysis of the Felines Manifesto as an attempt to understand why he chooses his various tones.
Have you ever felt the urge to hurt somebody? Nobody specific, really. Just the first person that crosses your path.
Moral analysis. The manifesto teaches no clear moral lessons. For the topic of moral themes, the Felines Manifesto is useless. The only knowledge that it will give you is what a product of toxic culture looks like, and you'll only see that in the few quotes of other people provided by Felines, our mentally unstable and unreliable narrator. A narrator who we will never begin to understand the mental state of on a substantive level. Even if we did, so what? We would only be understanding a mentally unstable 15-year-old in the middle of his niche internet-based social development. And I said what he covers is only a product of toxic culture because there is no criticism of what leads to the toxic Pokemon Shonen personalities that bother felines. Instead, he treats his targeted individuals as isolated, malicious actors. Not for 1 second does Felines mention the role that a hyper-competitive culture plays without the misbehavior of the people he critiques. He defaults to a naive explanation. People's evil sides are awakened by Pokemon Showdown, particularly the Monotype Premier League. And that's ridiculous. There's no direct equivalence of toxicity towards teammates with anyone's core personality. That's something that comes about as a response to someone's environment. But this isn't so removed from the way that many people view malice and evil. Most people will not frame inherent evil the way Felines does by saying, quote, "There is something deeply mean-spirited about his entire existence," or rambling about how there is a beast inside people that will be awakened by a competitive Pokemon League. However, it's comforting to view people as evil and irredeemable because then you don't have to ask the difficult questions. For instance, it's much easier to condemn 4chan users as racist and hateful individuals, which they often are, than it is to think about how we can stop how the internet socializes these kids towards racism. This easy explanation, people are inherently evil, allows us to oversimplify complex problems to a point where our solutions are not preventing people from becoming evil, but instead, removing people who are already evil. In the Felines Manifesto, it's obviously not that serious. Felines clearly engages in the toxic culture which led to Lucky Piper and Dugza acting the way they do. He's not immune to demeaning people over their losses or bragging about how good he is. The only impact of his naive worldview is making sure that no solutions will be reached. People will always continue to be mean to him as long as the toxic culture of Pokemon Showdown exists. But it doesn't comfort Felines to view it that way. It comforts Felines to view the problem as 3 specific people instead of toxic culture that he participates in.
Hey, how was today? What did you fuck up in there? What did you black?
Psychological/philosophical analysis. Much like his tone, Felines' state of mind and motivation for writing seems to shift and shimmy throughout the manifesto. This makes it difficult to analyze Felines' personal philosophy and attitude within the document. At several points in the manifesto, it even comes across as though he's trying to mask his emotions. So I decided to start with the basics. What behaviors felines think are important? I made a graphic for this like I'm in a fucking 6th grade presentation, or year 6 if you're British. Lucky Piper. Bad to felines because he is rude and complains in a way that felines dislikes. Lucky Piper. Bad as a person because he is an egotistical maniac and deeply mean-spirited. Dugza. Bad as a person because he is egotistical and being mean, but only because he's mean to his own teammates. I am Boo. Bad as a person because he is toxic and can't find a good enough reason to hate felines. Felines is attention-seeking and desperate. At first, it appears like Felines has a decent, or at least normal view of what toxicity is and how we should avoid a toxic internet culture. But as the document continues, I don't think this is true. The areas he focuses on in these graphics are hyper-specific and don't seem to be based on the gravity of the offense and are instead personal gripes. He is toxic in similar ways to the people he condemns. The only difference is that he doesn't demean people with intelligence or especially harsh words. But Felines certainly contributes to a hyper-competitive culture, but he thinks he's different anyways. He calls people the worst of all time and insults their skill level, and even opens the manifesto by calling someone a clown who has no intelligent thoughts. With that said, I'll give my thesis on why Felines felt the urge to create the manifesto. He's like this because of desperation for attention. Why else would someone care so much about Pokemon Showdown beef? He's in it for the spectacle, not a discussion on how to improve the community. None of the points on why I Am Boo is toxic are hating felines in the first place. This shows a vanity and lack of moral clarity from the perspective of felines. He's so far deep into his egotism that he has accepted being hated, or at least he wants to appear that way, but now wants people to hate him in a creative way. I can sympathize with this because creativity and imagination is clearly an important part of Feline's life. In addition, Felines constantly loses track of his main points, presuming he had them in his head in the first place. At several points in the document, Felines breaks up his critiques so that he can ramble about Pokemon gameplay and competitive decisions. This same concept also extends to the various points in the document where he suddenly stops caring and says things like, quote, I have even heard that he argued with his longtime friend I Am Boo. I honestly don't even remember this argument. This comes across as jarring given that the rest of the document takes itself so seriously, as well as the fact that he pretends to be a psychological mastermind at the end of the document. But the whole document is jarring anyways, and we love it like that. It's perfect. Conclusion. Thus, in summation, Felines gives us all both a deeper reflection into our society, as well as writing advice which will serve both novices and advanced wordsmiths alike. I'm not done.
Will video essays ever feel as serious as a written article?
We can drop the act now. Was the only point of this video to be dry humor? Because in reality, the Felines Manifesto is a piece of writing that, in most contexts, would be considered worthless. There's no world in which anyone hears about the Felines Manifesto if Felines release the document anywhere but the Pokemon Showdown community. And even still, the document will gradually fade into obscurity as its subject and intentions become gradually unclear. I framed much of this video essay as an instruction guide to writing like felines, but you'll never be able to do that. I'll never be able to do that either, no matter how many hours I spend analyzing Feline's sloppy, angsty writing style. The events that Felines writes about are only interesting because of how much emotional attachment he has to them, but they are so mundane they would have little to no entertainment value without him. In isolation, things like Lucky Piper saying "you brain-dead child" are just another out-of-pocket statement, and when you get context, the outbursts which Felines transcribes would be dismissible as Pokemon Showdown drama. Do you honestly think anyone is coming up with something like that by pure inspiration? So then, what is the form of this video?
Hey girl, you know you're the baddest bitch I've ever seen. And so, I just wanna show you off. Hey girl, you know you're the baddest ever.
2 semesters ago, I was in this English class that assigned us all sorts of weird readings. One of them was an article that Ernest Hemingway wrote for a newspaper. It was a guide for camping in the bushlands titled Camping Out. Today I found it via some website called artofmanliness.com, which is a favorite among us assigned male at birth non-binary people who miss toxic masculinity and its simple joys. That brings us to today's sponsor, Bespoke Post. Bespoke Post is a monthly subscription box that delivers you products like hunting knives and wine that will prevent you from being emasculated by our ever-present culture of welcoming and fluid gender expression. Wait, don't skip, I'm fucking with you, no one paid me anything to make this video. There's a catch to camping out though. It's awful in its purpose as a basic guide. I don't think Art of Manliness realized that. Curious. Hemingway goes into excessive detail with much of his advice, like when he tells his audience about the fly-detracting citronella and how a camper should cover the front of their tent with it. He does not tell his 1920 audience where on earth you get straight citronella or a proper tent, though. Some of his other advice is just plain awful. Quote, "When it is clear weather, you don't need to pitch your tent if you are only stopping for the night. Drive 4 stakes at the head of your make-up bed and drape your mosquito bar over that. Then, you can sleep like a log and laugh at the mosquitoes." For one, we have no idea what a mosquito bar is because he only told us the raw substance that detracts mosquitoes. And more importantly, how is a man, woman, or non-binary outdoors enthusiast to know if there will be clear weather 7 hours after they fall asleep? It's not like they can just check their Telegram or tune into the Weather Channel. They will carry a risk of waking up in the middle of the night soaked by a rainstorm or snowed on by snow. Perhaps most importantly for a beginner's guide to camping and a time with information about the world being inaccessible, Hemingway doesn't even provide a piece of advice on how to find a camping spot geographically. He presumes that his reader knows how to catch a trout and start a fire for that trout, but he does not provide any advice on where in Josh's name someone can find a trout stream out in the wild. My professor, who I called Dr. Zed, since he was Canadian and it sounded like a superhero villain, claimed that Hemingway was an excellent writer, which is probably true. He thought that there was such a severe disparity between Camping Out and any other of Hemingway's quality work. Its deficits were so massive that surely Hemingway was writing this for some ironic reason, instead of simply making a bad camping guide in the romantic year that is 1920. I don't know about all that, though. The professor wasn't specific on what exactly Hemingway intended by his article, if it wasn't just a sloppily and hastily thrown together article on camping for the Toronto Star Weekly. But I'll choose to assume it was intentionally bad for the purpose of being a guide, and was meant to provide value in some sense of irony that I don't quite understand. And I'm no different in my unfollowable advice, except for the fact that I probably put more effort into this video than Hemingway did in his article. Am I really saying that my video essay takes the same form as Hemingway's Camping Out? As abstract performance art masquerading as a guide? I think so. Performance art, and fiction and TV and film, should ideally evoke an emotion or perception that feels so real that the viewer forgets the fake nature of the art, at least for a little while. One day last semester, I read an article in the magazine called Current Affairs. It was an article by Nathan J. Robinson titled "A Bit More Magic Disappears from the Universe." Dramatic, I know, but he was correct. Robinson talked about how he lived in a romantic castle in his undergraduate years of university. The castle was not the most functional as a dormitory, but it provided him with a sense of wonder. He recently received news that the castle was being deconstructed and replaced with a more normal residence hall. This didn't upset him because there's a blatant utilitarian value to a typical modern residence hall. It will certainly cost less in maintenance and house many more students. But he was still upset by this because no one is considering making new castles. No one cares anymore. The nonfiction article about Robinson's time in university struck something in me that made me want to be that person talking about making a new castle. But as it may be clear if you know me or are a psychology expert like felines, I'm quite timid and prefer to focus most of my creative projects on isolated videos and articles that I share only to my friends and not to any broader community. So I made an article on my secret Medium blog, a guide to lesser-known, hidden, even romantic spots on the campus of my university. But the catch is that none of these spots existed. I made them all up, in turn making my article a functionally useless guide that promises its readers the idea of real-life exploration and secrets between me and them. Somehow, when provided without any pretense, everyone I showed the article to believed it was completely nonfiction. I described a Civil War bunker that I accessed by traveling underneath storm drains outside the art building. I described an underground abandoned theater and a hidden lounge, but everyone believed it. Of course, I could have made the fictional elements of these locations more intense, but I wanted to provide a balance of believability and a promise of romantic scenery. I call this practice deceptive art, and now I would like to make a parallel version of this hopeful feeling with my video essay. Instead of delivering a false promise of what Robinson would call universal access to adventure and mystery, I wanted to provide a perception of a novel education which my viewers couldn't find anywhere else. Have you ever heard of the debate between fact-based learning and general skills-based learning? Fact-based learning is the idea that education should be based around a specific set of facts and terminology. For instance, the theory of fact-based learning is why it's emphasized for every US student to learn about World War II, as well as why education curriculum may particularly value a book like To Kill a Mockingbird, The Great Gatsby, or even Lord of the Flies, which might be unfortunate for Felines because he likes to think of himself as different in his absurd understanding of psychology. A general skills-based education is one that values more student-independent learning while still emphasizing the development of skills such as critical thinking, creativity, problem-solving, and reading comprehension. This is a form of education that is becoming more popular as fact-based learning becomes known as old-fashioned. Inherently, this may seem like it has nothing to do with the Felines Manifesto, but in reality, this debate over the philosophy of education can help us find another metric to show how useless the manifesto is as a work of literature. In his contrarian video covering the topic, the YouTuber JJ McCullough argues that fact-based education is more beneficial than a general skills-based education. He addresses some problems within the general skills model of education, that being that it is essentially hollow. Many subjects are left unaddressed without fact-based learning. A student may take up interest with a niche topic such as the Spanish-American War, but their individualized education on this could be insufficient or misinformed if they don't have core knowledge of things such as what the United States President does in times of war or what colonialism is. To Americans, those may seem like obvious concepts, but we only know this information because the roles of a president in European history have been assigned as useful knowledge. In terms of societal value, core knowledge and fact-based education provides us with common topics of discussion and comprehension. This will provide unity and human connection to a society. However, if we frame this argument for fact-based learning another way, we get something like this. The subjects and ideas we are qualified and encouraged to speak on are based around fact-based learning. And when our core level of this fact-based knowledge is provided from a shared curriculum in lower education, then are we primed to only be informed on the same topics as a society? I think so. This restricts individualized learning to people who actively pursue facts about topics of interest instead of that being encouraged in school. But still, as JJ provides an extreme example of an individualized system, a child who exclusively reads books on Star Wars will likely not build any of the skills we associate with reading, such as critical thinking or knowledge of complex themes like morality, or basically anything that dystopian fiction is based around. And he's right, emphasis on general skills can create a deficit in our common education. I've definitely experienced that with my personal interest and knowledge on politics, digital media, and way too much familiarity with competitive Pokemon. I feel like a dumbass more than almost any other time when it comes to how little I know and understand about natural sciences and maths. There's this one episode of my favorite TV show, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. In it, Charlie, a character who is commonly depicted as unintelligent in anything that isn't music, says that he has been burning their trash because it is the most environmentally friendly option to dispose of garbage.
Absolutely. Where do you think the heat comes from? You burn the trash in the furnace? This bar runs on trash, dude. This bar is totally green that way.
How is burning trash green?
Because I'm recycling the trash into heat for the bar and lots of smoke for the bar and giving the bar the good smoky smell that we all like.
The bar smells like trash. That's the exact opposite of green, Charlie.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I could put the trash into a landfill where it's going to stay for millions of years. Or I could burn it up and get a nice smoky smell in here and let that smoke go into the sky where it turns into stars.
That doesn't sound right, but I don't know enough about stars to dispute it.
No, it's right. It's not.
Now, if I thug it out with my fundamental critical thinking, then I could probably disprove if someone claimed that burning trash creates stars. However, I was completely unsure as to why releasing vast amounts of smoke into the atmosphere is worse for the environment than landfill. It sounds obvious, but I couldn't think of a single reason as to why. I texted my brother after watching the episode and he gave me an explanation, so at least I know that the person who introduced me to It's Always Sunny has the knowledge to disprove Charlie's claims. So what? Educational emphasis on specific knowledge of social studies and facts about smoke creates a core knowledge, but it's merely a series of facts and terms that you need so you can read the broadest variety of books or speak to the greatest diversity of people. Witt, that's actually important and antisocial to disregard. This video is fact-based learning, and I only pretended it wasn't for your entertainment. I pretended it wasn't to make my YouTube video appear fulfilling with writing tips that you will never be able to apply, nor should you apply them in the first place. What Feline's made is maladaptive. If you undertake the difficult task of writing like him, then you'll have to adopt his mindset. Given that his mindset is a messiah complex, I genuinely hope no one gets in the mindset required to unironically create a Feline's Manifesto style document. And that's the problem. The manifesto is only so hilarious because of its unironic, self-serious nature. God damn, frat boys are fucking howling. Whatever, man. Probably didn't pick up on that. Again, I was lying to you. How can a YouTube video directly provide you with general skills? I can never predict what I get inspiration from, and it's difficult to give others deep inspiration too if they're a creative type, as extremely picky with their ideas as I am. And I'm telling you that this video is educational in its fact-based learning approach. However, my analysis of the Feline's Manifesto will provide you with knowledge even less useful than the facts about smoke which can reassure people of their intelligence. You're certainly not impressing anyone by learning of Feline's view on morality, his mindset, and certainly no one will care about his writing style unless you show them this video essay or the manifesto and they enjoy it. It's a Herculean task to explain why the Feline's Manifesto is interesting as an elevator pitch without immersing them in Feline's gnarly quotes or providing them a stimulating intro or transition like the ones I make.
Whatever you do, find yourself by any means necessary. Even if it means...
But it's still beneficial, and I hope that's why you've watched this far. Conversations where we inform each other of our niche interests are beautiful. It may seem lonely to spend time learning about an irrelevant topic, and in that way, all video essays are. Video essays are lonely.